Hello and welcome to Dialogue. The Education Ministry's response to a top political advisor's call for more physical education to make boys more masculine has triggered fierce online debate about what masculinity means in China. Why did this topic become so hotly debated on social media? What does masculinity mean today, and what is the Education Ministry out of touch or making the right move? To talk about those issues and more, I'm joined by Anna Tangen, an independent current affairs commentator, Professor Li Junzhao of the Beijing Foreign Studies University, and Xing Zheming, president of Task Force Consultancy. That's our topic. I'm Zhou Yue. Well, the Education Ministry is actually responding to the CPPCC members' proposal, who claim Chinese boys are becoming more timid and feminine, in part because they are taught by so many women teachers. Professor Li, are Chinese boys having a masculinity problem?
Well, this topic that Chinese boys are going through some kind of gender crisis has been going on at least for 10 or 15 years. So it comes in waves, but it is really dangerous to limit the definition of masculinity from my perspective. And the proposal itself by the CPPCC member and the response from the Ministry of Education are really not gender sensitive enough. And are also limiting the meaning or the possibility for a boy to be masculine.
NR, do you think the Education Ministry has a point? Because, yeah, obviously people think there's a problem with boys in China.
Well, let's separate the issues here. First off, there's a difference between encouraging masculinity in young men. They've shown developmental studies that indicate that boys need to be more active. They have more energy, especially when they're young, and that sports can be a great way of building confidence, not only in their personal, but also in their thinking. So this idea that equating this with some sort of toxic masculinity, I think is the wrong way. There are many different ways that you can raise children, allowing them to express themselves and being there, as opposed to sitting at home as couch potatoes and working the video games. I think this is a very, very constructive way of dealing with it.
And Zheming, I presume you are more dealing with the young generation of people in China. Do you sense there is a problem of masculinity deficit in boys?
Yeah. Thanks, Zhou Yue. As an entrepreneur myself, I work mostly with the post-90s and post-95 team members. While they don't really care about being masculine or just being defined as feminine or man, because it is an age of people embracing diversity, and we are embracing differences in this society. So definitely I think the Ministry of Education is responding to the CPPCC members' proposal in a very, very terrible way, I have to say, because they are not addressing the right answer with the question. And the question itself is very biased, because I don't think at this age the CPPCC member should be advocating such mindset that saying that boys or girls should be labeled as masculine or non-masculine, because I don't think this is the right approach to solve this issue by simply applying more male teachers in the workforce of the education system. I think they're just trying to be lazy about this.
I'm going to jump in here. First off, young men do need strong male stereotypes that they can follow, examples. And this is not something, this is in gender. I mean, in the United States, in many schools in the inner city, they're always looking for African American men or other minorities who can provide a good example, show how to act as a man. And in many of these cases, it's because they don't have strong masculine figures at home. But there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, this equating that gender is something you can pick up by yourself or something like that, I think that would go against the grain of the vast majority of people in China. And it's not about discriminating against people. It's really just allowing young men and girls to have good, high-quality people that they can emulate.
But can you first of all define masculinity? What is a boy supposed to look, act, and talk like?
Well, quite frankly,
Well,
well, go ahead.
I don't. You first.
Well, no, the reason I'm jumping in here is that it depends on the culture. This is not universal. There's nothing, you can't pick up a rock somewhere and says this is how young boys are supposed to act. We do know developmentally young boys need more activity. They need to build their confidence. And within China, there's a tremendous amount of pressure on boys. First off, every family wants one to carry on the name. Part of Confucianism is following this, producing a male heir of your own, supporting your parents. If you want to get married, I mean, you're supposed to have a house. You're supposed to have a good job, a car. All of these things to show that you have the strength to do that. And that's where you have this kind of cultural bias that the men have to stand up. They have to be confident and willing to take charge and get the things that are necessary for them to attract a good mate. So, you can't change the culture just because, it sounds politically correct to say that people can choose their gender types.
Professor Lee, so obviously there are some stereotypes associated with certain gender.
Yeah. I think on this issue, we really have to break this whole proposal and this debate into 3 points. First is physical education. Is it necessary, and should it be stressed, emphasized? The second point is, does physical education really relate to masculinity? And the third question is masculinity really
desirable,
going against femininity, or do Chinese women lack their own form of masculinity or not? So we have 3 issues.
Okay,
and
let's talk about one by one. First of all, is physical education really helping to boost the masculinity in boys? Probably shouldn't. I mean,
no, is physical education
you can relate to your
in
personal
dire
story.
necessity? Do we have a shortage of physical education now?
Yeah.
In the contemporary education system, especially at kindergarten level and primary school level? Is there a lack
what about you?
of physical
Can you tell
education?
us?
I mean, Zhou Yue, I have to agree with people on this. Is basically physical education during the entire education process is very essential for any gender or any people in the school, public or private, to boost their confidence and be athletic and be really, really part of this whole teamwork, which are the virtual or of the essence that people should be learning from. I don't think that we definitely need to define as whether or not it's masculine
But does
or not.
physical education also make boys more masculine?
I think that's part of the process, and that is one of the goals. Being masculine is part of the result that we don't have necessarily, limit manhood within only one image of masculinity. Because I grew up in northeastern part of the China, and actually from a local culturally perspective, people are really, really, having one-sided, opinion about how to be a man, which is being masculine or being very, very straightforward, which is sometimes people in a whole spectrum of teenagers, they don't necessarily need to follow the same stereotype. So some of the people just choose to, embrace physical education, but they do not want it to be labeled as masculine. As I have said that, I've been working with the younger generations for a long time, and I definitely believe that from a cultural perspective, the future generations of China, they don't want to be labeled with some of the, masculine or female or feminine. That is something that they find very offensive and discriminative. We have to acknowledge the facts.
And I think this same kind of a stereotype also exists in American schools. A boy is always supposed to play some sport, preferably basketball and baseball. And those boys who choose to probably go to a ballet class is considered not masculine enough.
Well, I think that's changed a lot, but you have to remember it depends on the society. As my colleague was saying, that where he grew up, There were certain expectations, and you can't, the world is not this homogenous zone where people get to, decide what gender they want to be and all those things. I think it can be extremely confusing. Obviously, sexuality issues aside, people have, you have to give children the opportunity to make good choices, but that means giving them good examples, putting them into activities. Sports is not just about what you do by yourself. It's working with a team. And these are very, very important lessons that young men and women have to learn in order to get successful in society. If you can't work as a team, you're not going to be a success. And I think you could find that, and I don't think anyone would disagree with that. So it's sometimes can be confusing. They were talking about masculinity. Remember, a lot of these guys remember the times when China, had to literally pry itself out of foreign occupation. Japan, if you didn't have people who were willing to stand up, were tough enough to fight, China would still be under the thrall of foreign influences.
Talking about foreign influence, pop culture is obviously an influence on the way that children think about gender. And some people say today's lack of masculinity is partly a result of the massive popularity of some kind of figures or celebrities. Here in China, they call them 小鲜肉, means handsome, groomed, delicate-featured, soft-skinned boys. Professor Li, you think that should be a problem? A lot of parents worry about that, but should it be?
Yeah, I mean, as the development of commercial or consumerism, we do see an increasing number of what we call the fresh meat singers and pop stars showing up in commercials for cosmetic products. So a lot of parents are worried that boys are paying more and more attention to skincare products. Boys are beginning to use foundations and use eyeliners, and boys
the things
begin
that girls
to have
do.
ears pierced. Yeah, these features are usually associated with being womanly or female or girly. So parents are worried, and teachers and particularly the authorities, educational authorities at different levels are worried that
should they worry?
These boys, they focus too much on being skinny and staying fair-skinned and staying beautiful. But it is different from the kind of masculinity that the government is pushing, which is to have perseverance, to be strong-willed, to have upright attitude. These two do not really equate each other.
But you think the government is actually encouraging perseverance and steadfastness rather than the physical?
Yeah, I think. Right.
Features.
I think the focus on physical education is not merely on the physical strength of individual body, but the intention is to build this kind of spirit, which is perseverance, which is responsibility.
But that can be the features and characters of both genders.
Yes, that's true. But
I think
it should be for both genders, but or for multiple genders, not just both genders. But
what I'm saying is that the parents worrying the boys doing the things you just described, wearing makeups and soft skins and more like girls do.
I mean, I have to jump in here.
I think it is just a diversity of aesthetic values in contemporary days. It has nothing to do with whether this feminine, I mean, by experience, boy lacks perseverance, lacks self-disciplining.
But you don't have problems boys wearing makeup or
so.
Dressing up like boys and have delicate features as the popular icon.
I know. No, I know. Like some of my male students, they may look feminine, but they are very self-disciplined, and
Okay.
they have very strong perseverance. They are very altruistic, and they really care a lot about
But
others.
Einar, do
And
you have problems
they take
boys
very good
dressing like
leadership roles.
girls, acting
I
like
really don't
girls,
see that.
doing things like girls?
Well, if they're acting like a girl, they're obviously not acting like a male, and that's really what is in contention here. Should
What do
society?
you mean by acting like a male? Right? What do you mean
Well,
by that?
I mean, if you're acting like a
Do you
girl, you're not
always-
acting like a male. I think that's self-explanatory. I mean, there are certain role models. You can argue as much as you want that they're outmoded, that people should choose their gender, that this is something that's open, that we need 16 different types of bathrooms.
I mean,
That's fine.
everyone, we
But
all
you
have the
look, you're
softer
arguing
side,
in essence
the
that
communicative, the emotional side, and we all have the strong-willed,
yes,
the
that's all very nice,
heart-chin
but
side,
most
right?
parents are not of the opinion
So-
that they want their sons to be dressing up
Yes,
like girls.
Professor Lee, you have to address that. Those common characters can be characters of both genders.
Yeah.
What we are talking about, should boys do something that girls are supposed to do, at least in the minds of many parents?
I mean, can I jump in?
I mean, in
Let
contemporary
him jump in,
culture,
let him
when
in.
everything is so diversified, I think the boundary we have already shaken off a lot of really rigid gendered boundaries.
That's very fine,
Because,
but you're
well, in the
not their
pa- in the
parent.
past-
You have to
In the
leave
past,
some
girls
leeway
were
for
not even
parents to be
supposed to wear
parents.
sneakers,
You
I mean,
can't
I
describe
wanted
girls
to
Okay.
for
jump in
girls.
on this
Sneakers
issue.
were
let me-
basically,
Let me be the ringleader here. Jobin, what do you want to say?
Basically, I think, as I said, this is a society that's moving forward in a way that people embrace diversity. So I think we always say that we can never judge a book by its cover. So the point is that I don't see there is a big problem by any gender, male or female, and other gender, types. They choose to live in their own way, and actually, it's being presentable or being nice to themselves has nothing to do with other people. And what's being frustrated, and I think by the most of the people discussing this issue online, is whether or not the Ministry of Education should be taking a gesture like this, and why they are approaching such issue by simply saying adding more male teachers in their workforce. That is something that people are angry with. And the other side of the story is from a female perspective. Is basically people are saying that, are you saying that females are actually
Sexism.
less than feminism, being a female is less advantageous, or it's a kind of really discriminative way of saying this as a group, So I think that a lot of discussions on Weibo, which has been going on heatedly for days, I think people are just not talking about adding PE teachers or being athletic or being physically well. They're trying to create a new trend, which is just people shouldn't be labeling people in a very bipolar way.
And also, we've collected some views and perspectives from social media users on this topic. Let's take a look what some of them have said. Now, Mixin, well, he or she said, in the 1990s, I was bullied in elementary school for not behaving like a man, obviously a boy. So what worries me is enhancing masculinity could increase the possibility of school bullying. Education's goal is to teach teenager to be a kind, inclusive person instead of with bias and hostility. Well, Einar, it seems that to impose masculinity requirements on boys, that means every boy should look roughly the same. They have to be physically fit. They are not supposed to play girls' games. They should be athletic. Then what about those boys who choose not to do that?
Well, it's fine. I mean, there are different ways of handling that. But having strong male role models is, that serves about 95% of the population. And, there's a very important issue here. It's fine for people to sit and talk about other people's children. But when you have a child, you want to have a say in how they're brought up, what values they have. Whether you're religious or not, whatever that is. And I do not think that that is something that should be taken up by the schools. In the United States, we've gone kind of overboard. Parents are rejecting this idea that everything should be set by the government, that it should cater to the minority instead of, what they want for their children. Now, that does not mean you do not want toxic masculinity. This idea that being a man means that you pick on those who are different from yourself or weaker than yourself. That is the exact opposite. But that isn't, you can't equate those two things. Playing sports doesn't make you a bully, right? So
but
think of the aims. It's perseverance.
But sometimes in schools, that culture that brags about masculinity always has a consequence that those who are not so masculine boys are bullied, and they are considered less than those more masculine
I hate to
boys.
say this, but the world is nothing. When you were born, did anyone give you a piece of paper and say that life would be fair? Some girls are prettier than others, and it results in exactly the same thing. There are always pecking orders and things like that. The key is to have teachers who can say to these people, do not be unkind. Have the kind of virtues that your society appraises. Be kind to people, but also be steadfast, persevere, be able to work with people.
Yeah.
That's the case of an educator.
Is there anything special here in China, Professor Lee, that says about our culture and our attitudes towards gender and the stereotypes?
Well, I think in this Ministry of Education's policy, there is this anxiety that girls are achieving a lot more. So in the Chinese saying, it is yin sheng yang shui, meaning girls are overachieving and boys are short achieving, meaning not achieving enough. So there is this anxiety, this hidden anxiety that women are surpassing, girls are surpassing boys from kindergarten to elementary school to middle school. So this policy is actually kind of a favoritist policy towards boys. It does not say anything about girls should enhance their physical strength and should have better physical education. And
So you're looking at this from a feminist point of view. You're saying that this is actually undermining the girls' status.
Yes. Yeah, and we have to.
But a lot of boys are talking
at
like
gender equality, right?
Okay.
Feminist meaning gender equality. So, and I agree with my colleague that we should not really depend on the school to correct everything in the society.
Yeah.
And the other hidden anxiety is the absent fathers. In child rearing and in upbringing of offsprings in families. And now the society, the fathers are absent, and not just because the fathers are really busy being the breadwinner. Actually, during COVID-19, we have millions of cases to show that even when fathers are locked in under the same roof with his wife and his child and his his parents, he's not doing much. He's not participating much
because they
in child
assume
rearing,
that the
right?
home work is supposed to be taking care of moms.
Yeah, that is the definition of kind of heterosexual macho masculinity.
And do you think that
I
also
think that's
has
a gross generalization.
husband
I think it's,
stays
unless you
from
have statistics to back that up, you should
household
be careful.
chores, husband stays away
But
from
does that have an
helping
impact
the kids do the
on the
homework,
children's
right?
growth?
So if the family structure lacks something, you can't really totally count on having some extra number of male physical class teachers to correct this problem, which is very deep and structural
we
in the
need
whole
to
society.
use very carefully about the word, correct someone, because as I have said consistently, that we should be embracing diversity in this and talking about interest of the minority communities, that their interest also matters as well. And the other thing that I wanted to share is that we need to redefine the role of schools in educating young people, because we always say that it's not only the school's job to train the younger generation, but they spend quite some time there. And talking about school bullying, if the highest authority of China's education system impose such rules or such stereotype in the entire education system, I don't think that people without those characteristics that are defined as legit or as normal will be treated with such, a pressure within the system. So I definitely think the people online or people are not happy with this situation is basically we need to resolve issues that are more deep than simply putting PE teachers there. Talking about how to protect minority people or people who are vulnerable from school bullying. Do we have a sustainable way out? Do we have an institutional solution on this? And definitely, if we are looking into the future, are we training our young generations in a very, bipolar, standard
So
way?
are you saying the masculinity part
Yeah.
is easily should be cast aside? It's not a big problem. There's deeper problems with our education.
I mean,
Definitely. Let me give you an example. In Jiangsu province, they seem to try to correct this problem, which is the severe absence of male teachers in kindergartens and elementary schools. So they give boys a special policy. They would recruit boys into normal education, meaning teacher occupation
school.
track, free of charge. And in 2018, after this favoritist policy towards male high school graduates, they trained 2,000 male teachers, and 2,000 male teachers in 2018 were assigned into different kindergartens.
What other ways
So
can
they
encourage better
balance,
equality of
but
teachers'
listen,
gender
but listen,
arrangement better than this?
This didn't last long because the kindergarten teachers were so poorly paid. All these male teachers, very soon they left this occupation.
Okay.
So this really shows another structural problem. Teachers are not proper paid. So we call this the feminization of staff and faculty at kindergarten and elementary school level. In many places, the ratio between male teacher and the female teacher is around 1 versus 99 or 10 versus 90. So it's really tilted. But it is
will teachers
problem.
better paid than there will be more male teachers in kindergarten and schools? Are you saying it was sorted out?
Well, I think if the compensation is better, males tend to go to more lucrative jobs, just like
females as
computer
well.
program,
I would say.
right?
Now you're being sexist.
I think we are talking about another issue.
No,
I think we are not addressing
because
the
males
payment.
are expected to hold their macho masculinity by having higher pay, by having better jobs, by having more promising.
But you're arguing
So
against
I
your
really,
own
really
point.
want to.
Right? So,
Hi, so I
Okay.
really want to share a case study with all of you guys. It's basically, how a public, institution or a university or school should be embracing inclusivity and, embracing diversity. It's basically, my alma mater, Communication University of China, because we are art school, we featured on foreign language studies and also on television, things like
You
that.
have 30
majors like
seconds
that.
left.
So we have 70% of the, students are actually girls and female. So actually, by having that issue, because in our teaching buildings, actually there is a shortage of female bathrooms. So actually,
20
the university leadership decided to convert some of the male bathrooms into the female bathrooms, and because they create a new balance of people using bathrooms to release themselves properly. So I think this is something that, the universities or the educators and the education authorities should be imposing. They have the administrative authority.
Obviously, it deserves longer debates on this topic. Thank you very much. We're running out of time. Thank you, NR. Thank you, Professor Li. Thank you, Zheming.
Thank you.
It's been very thought-provoking conversations. Thank you for watching Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Zhou in Beijing. Goodbye.